Hi, this is Robert Rapier, and this is R Squared Energy TV. On this week's episode, I have only one question, but it's a very important question. It's about energy storage. So, I recently gave a presentation at UC Santa Barbara, and because I'm talking to students who will potentially be professors someday and they'll be working on their own problems, I identified what I think is the single most important problem in all of renewable energy, and that is the problem of energy storage. And that is related to the question that I have this week. And the question is, I was curious if you had heard about this guy, and the guy is Daniel Nocera, and his process. So Daniel Nocera is a professor at MIT, and his process is an artificial leaf. So it's artificial photosynthesis. So he's got this little square, and it's got some catalyst on it, and when sunlight strikes, it actually splits water into hydrogen and oxygen, as is the case with photosynthesis. So this sort of problem, it's a very important problem, but it's very difficult. I mean, the energy storage solutions we have, when you think about them, we've got batteries, and I don't know if people realize, but battery energy density compared to, say, liquid fuels is extremely low. It's only 5 to 10% of the energy efficiency of, say, gasoline. So we've got some processes like that say biomass, for instance. The photosynthesis of efficiency of biomass is only maybe 1%, but it has a built-in storage mechanism. So 1% of the sunlight comes in, and the biomass converts that ultimately into sugars and the cellulose and so forth that make up the biomass. Solar cells are much more efficient, so they're maybe 15% efficient versus 1% for photosynthesis. But there's no real good storage outside of batteries, and that's what's typically used for solar cells. So the idea behind Nocera's invention would be combining a very high efficiency of something like a solar cell with a better storage outlet, like converting into say hydrogen for storage. But when you think about it, you can imagine all sorts of variations of this. If you had a solar cell that was diverting energy into, say, biomass production, say a specific long chain hydrocarbon. I mean, you could envision sunlight actually creating a liquid fuel, and that's sort of like the Joule Biotechnologies process. So they're trying to up the photosynthetic efficiency and force conversion of the sunlight into particular liquid fuels. So, this is like a very shortened version of the process that Mother Nature did originally. It created biomass, the biomass sank, the earth converted it. So you're trying to speed all that up and do it in one operation. And so, going forward, things like wind and solar will always be limited until we get much better storage solutions. And this Daniel Nocera, his invention, and it's still very much in the lab. And the idea with the invention right now is that they will that you take the hydrogen in and use it in a hydrogen fuel cell, or just use the hydrogen to combust. But right now it's very early on in the lab. So what do I think about the process? It's still very much experimental phase, but it's sort of holy grail kind of stuff. It's very important problem that has to be solved. I mean, you think about the energy storage options that we have. We've got batteries, of course, and they're fairly known technology. They've been around for a long time, but they have very low energy density, and they're relatively expensive for the amount of energy that they do store. So then we have things like pumped storage, which is geographically limited, and it's not very efficient to say for a hydropower plant. Whenever there's more water flowing than you really need, you let it flow and you pump it back up and store it for later on. I mean, if you've got more supply than you have demand, you could store some of the supply back up for later. But you lose efficiency both in the letting it flow and then pumping it back up. There's efficiency losses both ways, and it's also there's only certain places you can do that. There are a lot of more exotic options like compressed air storage, capacitors, flywheels. There's thermal storage. But a lot of these, and artificial photosynthesis, which we're talking about here, they're much more long term. So I don't think we'll see this sort of invention commercially producing anything in the next 5 years. but it's very interesting research. It's a very fruitful area, I think, to understand a little bit better about how Mother Nature actually takes and takes sunlight and converts it into energy. And there are ways that we could potentially improve upon that with sort of the artificial cell, the artificial leaf that he's invented. I think one of the big questions will be catalyst productions. It requires a catalyst. How much energy goes into making that catalyst? Can that be produced cheaply? And how long does the leaf itself last? I mean, does the catalyst degrade over time, and so forth and so on? But the process is very interesting. I've been watching it for a long time. I've thought for a very long time that artificial photosynthesis could be huge if we can get it right and it can be done economically. So with that, that's this week's episode. Please tune in next week. Thank you.